I want to get to how the obstacles today and how we get past them. But just to put a fine point on it real quick, going back to the history. So how did the progressives really start to implement the policies and procedures that made it impossible for the president to fire everyone? Because this is really a sea change. We go from a system in which the president can fire pretty much everybody to not. So over the last 100 years, right? How did they put this together? What did they do?
Well, the first thing to understand is that government over the last 100 years, now maybe 90 years, I suppose you could say, is doing much more than it used to do. That is to say, the scope of government, the things into which the national government involves itself is so far beyond what the Constitution originally envisioned, that the argument was, now that the government was doing all of this additional activity, there was no way that a legislature, that a Congress could possibly keep up with making all of the specific rules and regulations, all of the legislating that is required to manage all of the affairs into which the government has now gotten itself. So what do? Right? Well, the argument of the progressives was Congress should essentially delegate very, very, very broad directives and very broad swaths of authority to administrative entities, right? So it should establish these entities in the bureaucracy. They should be staffed with experts, and to them would be delegated the task of coming up with the specific rules and regulations to manage all of the things into which the federal government had begun to involve itself that were just unprecedented at this time. And so in a way, once we made that transformation, once we just changed utterly our understanding of the scope of government, then in a way, the administrative state kind of followed as a logical necessity, because Congress itself just simply could not do the job. And so, this is where you got the advent of the social sciences, for example, the idea that the university could provide an education for bureaucrats that could then kind of be put in the hands of the state. And the argument was these people should be shielded from political control, because what they were doing was well beyond the original political mission of the Constitution. And so this is where you had agencies being created, and then through things like civil service, or at the higher levels, the president would be prevented from exercising a full removal power. This was put into a lot of the laws at the time. So a lot of the agencies that were created both in the Progressive era and in the New Deal era, Congress explicitly put in provisions. They would create these entities in the executive branch. Where else, after all, could they be? But the president was specifically prohibited from removing them. And you see this argument being raised now by defenders of the bureaucracy, saying, "Hey, this is illegal. Congress has carved out these agencies from being influenced by the president in this way." That's the argument you're having some 80, 100 years later.
Yeah, so let's go to that, because here we have, okay, so the president used to be able to fire people. Progressives say no. Congress says no, we're creating these executive positions, but actually the president cannot get rid of these people, is not in full control of them. All right, so what does the Trump administration do here? If the Trump administration says, well, I'm sorry, we don't think that that's constitutional, and we're going to fire these people, and this goes to the Supreme Court. What happens next? What are the obstacles there? Because I think for a lot of people, even people who are fairly political and care about this stuff, it still is sort of opaque, or like how it's like trying to grab water. Like, why can't we fire them? Damn it, right? So if the president says, okay, to hell with what you said, Congress, I'm going to fight this in the courts. What are the big looming obstacles that are in the way?
Well, I mean, the biggest obstacle is this is the way that we've done business now for almost 100 years. And
Right.
so in a way,
Right.
when you have the Trump administration coming in and saying, hey, actually, this isn't the way our system is supposed to work, from in the mind of most people, what is our system? It's the system that we've had in recent decades, and with all the
Hmm.
precedents that have been established. And so it's very different than any recent understanding. But essentially, the turn of the tide here came in the 1930s. Congress was enacting statutes where it would create agencies in the executive branch, but would say, well, this is part of the executive branch that the president doesn't really get to control, so we're not going to allow him to have a full removal power. And the courts really started to let those statutes stand,
Hmm.
and that started in the 1930s. I think now many folks paying attention have heard of the Humphreys Executor v. United States case from 1935. This is one of these cases where people previously hopefully had never had occasion to really think much about. But that was the famous case that upheld the Federal Trade Commission and the way that the Congress had structured it and basically protected the Federal Trade Commission from the removal power of the president. And the court said in that case, this ironically is FDR who tried to remove a pre-New Deal Federal Trade Commissioner. And the court said in that case, well, that's okay. We think Congress happens in the history of the Supreme Court from the point of view of being true, faithful to the original constitutional understanding. And so that is the decision now that the Trump administration is up against. And I think what is going on there, and again, I have no inside information on this, of course, but I think that the folks in the administration who work on these things, they see in the courts an opening, maybe not in the lower courts, certainly, but at the Supreme Court level, to revisit this very grave constitutional error from the 1930s. And the court has certainly given some indications in recent decades that it is open to trying to restore a more constitutional understanding to how the executive branch is run. There was a case that President Trump won back in May. It was a preliminary go at it, but where the court indicated that it was sympathetic
Right.
to allowing the president to have a more robust removal than what has been the practice over recent decades in some of these agencies. So I think they see that as an opening. It's very frustrating because obviously the lower levels of the courts, it's easier to judge shop. You're getting a lot of roadblocks, but these things are starting to percolate up to where the adults are in the judicial branch. And so I think they're going to start to see some more success. I'd be happy to talk more about that if you want to go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really important because so there's a number of things to talk about in order to solve the problem. How do you actually say you're fired to the administrative state? But here, I mean, this is very concrete, right? You're saying in 1935 there's a decision where the court and the court has used this ever since says no, these guys are protected from the executive and he cannot in fact fire them, despite the fact that, going back to the Constitution, these things were argued about, but it was generally accepted that he could, fire most people. So that's very concrete. Like, okay, and I'd like to hear more of this even from the administration, where people just say that decision needs to be overturned. That was unconstitutional, and we need to knock that back, because I think that's a clear explanation, right, for people in the audience. Like, okay, so the Supreme Court is a real problem here. They said something that really they don't have the backing for. Let's have that debate, because we don't want to just base the Supreme Court decisions. The administrative state gets to stay because that's the way we've done it for the last however many decades. And people are ready for change. So, I mean, what do you think that's right? I mean, they should just take aim at this case and say, no, this is unconstitutional. It was an error, and we got to overturn it. Do you think they will, or did they understand this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely to happen. I mean, first, I should say, and this goes with a lot of what's going on today. We're having these battles in the courts. There's a better way to do this.
Mm.
The better way to do this is for Congress to understand the Constitution, for Congress to take back on its own constitutional authority, and for it to understand that these laws are wrong. I mean, this is the administrative state is a creature of Congress. It was created by Congress. Congress enacted it by statute, and Congress is the one that has put into place, all of these broad delegations and all of these sort of strange, carve outs for bureaucrats who are protected from presidential control. Congress can undo this anytime it wishes, and that's certainly the more straightforward path. That would involve a lot of fighting in Congress, but after all, I mean, that's what we're supposed to have elections for, getting things done. But elections come and go. Congress kind of, as everybody has seen, kind of hides, and so unfortunately, it has fallen to the courts, which in our system is really not the way it's supposed to operate. But when Congress has abdicated its role, then there's no other choice. There's no other avenue, and so these things are litigated. I think to turn to the second part of your question, the case in May was very telling. The case called Trump v. Wilcox, and it pertained to a member of the National Labor Relations Board, which by law the president is not supposed to be able to remove. But in this case, the president did remove the commissioner. This was overturned by the lower courts, but then on appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court said, "Look, we're sympathetic to the president here. We think that this commission exercises considerable executive power. Mm-hmm. We think, therefore, that there's no constitutional justification for limiting the president's control over it, and it allowed the president to go forward in this.
All right.
That encouraged the president, in turn, to make some other high-profile removals. Mm-hmm. Specifically, there's 3 members of the Consumer Product Safety Commission who were recently removed. The courts have stymied that removal at the lower level. That is now being kind of percolated at the Supreme Court level. So I think they're ultimately likely to prevail on a lot of this, I would have to say. That would be my prediction.
I mean, this is what's so exciting about what's happening. It's not all happening at once, and people need to realize how far we need to go, right? But we're starting to see percolating actual action, right? Pushing the courts. So I want to run through the other 2 branches in the time we have left. So we just went through the courts. I mean, the fact that there is this precedent that the president can't actually fire people. The Trump administration is pushing that. You're saying, and rightly, that as you go up the ladder where the adults are in the courts, they recognize that there's not really a good argument for this at all. And the Trump administration has shown that it can win here when he just starts doing it and removing people. But nonetheless, as you say, Congress is the one that could easily, roll all this back, right? Now, the problem with Congress, of course, is you say if they actually understood the Constitution, I think there's more people every year in Congress who understand Instagram pretty well. And social media, a lot of influencers in that body. But they created it, and now they're a creature of it, right? So that is the place probably where a lot of people feel the most hopeless who think about these things. What the hell do you do mm-hmm. about Congress? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like what resuscitates Congress? How do you, when you look at this now, you look at this, you get to know these people. It's really depressing, to be honest. That's the area in which you say, throw up your hands and say, what the hell do we do? But do you have any thoughts about what could be done?
Yeah, you're quite right that Congress seems to be more of a place for people who want a platform than it is for people who want to carry out constitutionally mandated legislative duties. I think the major obstacle right now to Congress doing its job is the filibuster in the Senate. because, when you have elections and members of Congress compete on major questions and the public weighs in through an election, still you can't get anything done because of the filibuster hurdle. The filibuster, of course, people think this kind of is handed down from the founders. Long story short, it wasn't. It's an invention. It's a supermajority device. It's actually the kind of device in a legislature that the founders argued against because they thought it was un-Republican. They thought it gave the minority to the ability to control a majority, which would be un-Republican. And so, I think if we didn't have the filibuster right now in the Senate, you'd be able to enact a lot more of these reforms straightforwardly. The issue there, a lot of times that's nails on the chalkboard to a conservative because conservatives worry about overactive government. And the filibuster over the years has had the tendency to kind of gum things up and stop government from doing a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. All right, last, let's go to the presidency itself. We talked about what needs to happen in the courts, what needs to happen in Congress. I will say about Congress real quick. I do think that the one solution would be a really strong leader, right, in the presidency, like you see Trump doing now, leaning on everyone and telling them this is what you have to do. But the path to that is obviously tricky, given that so many of them are beholden to the administrative state. But in any event, what do you think President Trump should do? If you're advising the office of the presidency right now, how do you break that down? What are the things he should do to regain or to use the power that he should have to fire the administrative state?
Well, first of all, I think you're right that the president is providing the kind of leadership that Congress could take advantage of if it were of a mind to do it. I mean, think about the DOGE spending cuts and how there's been no will in Congress at all to do anything about spending. And think about the spotlight that the DOGE efforts shined on all of these ridiculous expenditures when that was really up and running in the first part of the Trump administration. That was a gift to Congress. It's been very difficult for Congress to cut spending as a rule, but here Trump, through his leadership, had put a spotlight on all of these things that like 90% of the country would agree were absolutely ridiculous and should be cut. And Congress could have taken that ball and run with it. That was an opening that they haven't had in decades and decades. And instead, you see them squabbling about some of the smallest cuts and, acting like they're being raked over hot coals and tortured for things that are tiny fractions of what the federal government actually spends money on. So that's a real lost opportunity. In terms of other things that the president can do, I think it's being done right now. I think that they are being very aggressive in the courts because that's the only forum that is left to them since fellow Republicans in Congress aren't willing enough to take the fight in the legislature. So you go in the courts and you press it, and they're doing that. They're taking it on the chin on a lot of these district courts because it's easy to judge shop. But you have to remember the president's been in office now for 7 months. Mm-hmm. This is relatively early in his administration. They already have had a lot of very big questions pushed up to the Supreme Court level where they have, by and large, been winning. Yeah, not in every instance and maybe not exactly in every way that they would have wished, but by and large, they've been winning. These things are percolating up, and it's only a matter of time. So I think they need to keep pressing on that. And I think the Supreme Court has to be very careful because if it doesn't continue to intervene and even intervene more aggressively with what's going on at the lower courts, they're really going to put the executive in a very difficult position. They're going to create a crisis of legitimacy for the courts themselves. And so I think right now it's keep on doing what you're doing, keep pressing the issues and publicizing the issues that the public is with you on, on the immigration, on cutting the ridiculous spending, on especially, getting the criminals who aren't supposed to be in the country out of the country. I think these are all things that will bear fruit. They've borne fruit already, and they're going to bear even more fruit in time.
Professor Pestritto, Hillsdale College, pleasure to have you on. Won't be the last time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Enjoyed it.